The SWAT team was halfway through clearing my pontoon boat when the HOA president shouted with a triumphant tone, "He's got an unlicensed hammock." I was handcuffed in swim trunks, dripping wet, while two officers debated whether my citronella candles qualified as open flames. The situation had officially spiraled out of control. But let me back up and tell you how a simple move to a lake cabin turned into the most ridiculous confrontation of my life. 3 days earlier, I had driven 12 hours from Kansas City to finally claim my late uncle's lake cabin in Waverly Shores, a sleepy but smug little HOA-run community nestled around Lake Trillium. My name is Miles Atwood, and as a reclusive wildlife photographer, I was hoping for bird calls and bonfires. Instead, I was greeted at 6:07 a.m. on move-in day by Lynette Dorsey, HOA president, self-described property protector, and woman who once banned chalk art for being graffiti adjacent. She stood at my property line tapping her iPad furiously, her oversized sunglasses reflecting my confused expression. "This property can't be yours," she declared with an authoritative tone that suggested she'd practiced this speech. "It hasn't gone through HOA initiation, and you're in direct violation of 6 codes." She paused dramatically, pointing at my uncle's flower bed. One being non-native landscaping. That daisy? Illegal. I blinked, still holding my coffee and car keys. "I literally just arrived 5 minutes ago," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And that's a native wildflower my uncle planted 20 years ago." "Irrelevant," she snapped, making another note on her tablet. "You'll need to submit Form 7B for legacy vegetation exemption, but I can tell you right now it won't be approved. We have standards here at Waverly Shores." That was just the beginning. Lynette began her campaign of attrition immediately. By day 2, I had received 3 printed warnings in Comic Sans font taped to my kayak. The violations ranged from improper watercraft coloration to excessive bird attraction. I found my dock tagged with "Inspection Fail" in orange spray paint, which seemed ironic given her stance on graffiti. The next morning, I spotted Lynette in full scuba gear trying to measure my underwater mooring lines. When I walked down to the dock to ask what she was doing, she surfaced dramatically, pulling out her regulator to shout, "These anchor points are 2 inches beyond the approved boundary. This is a clear encroachment on community water space." "Lynette," I said calmly, though my patience was wearing thin, "those mooring lines have been there since 1995. They're grandfathered in." She climbed onto my dock uninvited, flippers slapping against the wood. "Nothing is grandfathered without proper HOA documentation," she said with a condescending tone. "I'll need to see permits dating back to installation." Things escalated quickly from there. She accused me of hosting an unapproved aquatic social when I waved at 2 teenagers paddleboarding past my dock. "Social gatherings require 48-hour notice and liability insurance," she insisted, photographing the innocent kids from 300 feet away. The next day, she tried to impound my canoe using a tow truck from her nephew's detailing business. I caught the whole thing on my wildlife cameras, including her frustrated argument with the tow truck driver who kept explaining he couldn't legally tow a boat from private property. Later that afternoon, I caught her measuring my windows with a laser level from behind my shrubbery. "The trim is half an inch too wide," she announced when I confronted her. "It disrupts the architectural harmony of the lakefront." "Lynette, please get off my property," I said firmly. "This is harassment." She laughed, a sharp sound that scared away the cardinal I'd been photographing. "Harassment? I'm conducting official HOA business. If you don't like it, you shouldn't have moved into a covenant-controlled community." On day 3, I installed security cameras, partly for the wildlife photography but mostly because Lynette had started showing up at odd hours. The footage I captured that night was pure gold. At 2:37 a.m., there she was in all black clothing, picking my cabin lock and rearranging my deck chairs to what she called HOA-approved symmetry. But day 4 was when everything exploded. I woke up to find 911 response vehicles surrounding my cabin. Lynette stood in my driveway, gesturing wildly at officers while clutching her iPad like a shield. "He's a vagrant squatter with a suspicious tripod," she declared loudly as I emerged in my pajamas. "He's got a thermal lens. Probably a spy. Or worse, a commercial photographer operating without a home business permit." The lead officer, a tired-looking man named Deputy Harrison, turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Sir, we've had a report that you've broken into this property. Can you provide identification and proof of ownership?" "Of course," I said, maintaining my calm despite the absurdity. "Would you like to come inside? I have all my documents ready." As I led the officers inside, Lynette tried to follow, but Deputy Harrison held up a hand. "Ma'am, please wait outside." "But I'm the HOA president," she protested with an indignant tone. "I have authority here." "Not inside a private residence you don't," the deputy replied firmly. I showed the officers my deed, my uncle's will, my identification, and even family photos hanging on the walls. Then I pulled up my security footage on my laptop. "I think you'll find this interesting," I said, playing the video of Lynette breaking into my cabin. Deputy Harrison's expression shifted from apologetic to stern. "Ma'am," he called out to Lynette, "can you explain why you're on video entering this property without permission at 2:37 this morning?" Lynette's face went through several shades of red. "That's HOA-sanctioned inspection," she sputtered. "I have every right to ensure compliance." "No, ma'am, you don't," Deputy Harrison said with a weary tone. "Breaking and entering is a crime, regardless of your HOA position." That's when the situation took an unexpected turn. A younger officer suddenly spoke up with recognition in his voice. "Wait, aren't you the lady who called about a surveillance goose last month?" Deputy Harrison's eyes widened. "And the woman who reported a meth lab that turned out to be a pottery kiln?" "And the terrorist cell that was actually a book club," added a third officer. It turned out Lynette had quite a reputation with local law enforcement. 5 previous false reports, including one where she claimed her neighbor was running an illegal zoo because they had 2 parakeets and a goldfish. "This is harassment," Deputy Harrison said sternly to Lynette. "Filing false reports is a crime. You're looking at fines and possible jail time if you continue." Lynette's demeanor shifted from righteous indignation to panic. "But he's violating HOA codes," she protested weakly. "The hammock isn't registered." "That's a civil matter, not a criminal one," the deputy explained patiently. "You can't call 911 for HOA violations." As the officers prepared to leave, they issued Lynette a formal warning for filing a false report and trespassing. The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of shock and disbelief that her authority had been challenged. But the real justice came later that week. Word of Lynette's police confrontation spread through Waverly Shores like wildfire across dry brush. HOA board members who had quietly tolerated her antics for years suddenly found their courage. An emergency board meeting was called, and I was invited to attend as a concerned resident. The community center was packed. Lynette sat at the board table, still trying to project authority despite the whispers filling the room. The board treasurer, a mild-mannered accountant named Gerald, cleared his throat nervously. "We've conducted a surprise audit of HOA finances," he announced with a shaky voice that grew stronger as he continued. "There are some irregularities we need to address." The audit revealed that Lynette had been charging members for decorative mulch fees that didn't exist, diverting over $15,000 to purchase what she called certified boardroom essential oils and executive-grade meditation crystals for her home office. "Those were necessary for conducting HOA business," Lynette protested with a defensive tone. "A calm president makes better decisions." But the real bombshell came when the county inspector stood up. A stern woman with clipboard and no-nonsense attitude, she announced that Lynette's underwater dock inspections were not only unauthorized but violated several safety regulations. "Scuba diving to measure private property without certification or permits is reckless endangerment," the inspector stated flatly. "The county is issuing a cease and desist order for all aquatic HOA activities." The room erupted in frustrated murmurs. Years of pent-up grievances came pouring out. One resident complained about Lynette measuring grass height at 5 a.m. Another described her climbing their fence to photograph non-compliant bird feeders. "I have video evidence," I announced, standing up with my laptop, "if the board would like to see it." The board president, looking relieved to have ammunition, quickly agreed. I connected my laptop to the projector and played a compilation of Lynette's greatest hits. There she was in night vision, creeping around my deck. In full daylight, throwing pine cones at my windows while yelling, "You'll regret this, Birdman." The scuba diving footage was particularly damning, showing her using a crowbar to try to pry up what she thought was an illegal dock anchor but was actually a natural rock formation. The room went silent except for a few muffled snickers. Lynette's face had gone from red to pale, her usual confident demeanor crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. "I call for a vote of no confidence," announced board member Patricia, a retired teacher who'd clearly had enough. "All in favor of removing Lynette Dorsey as HOA president." Every hand in the room shot up, including those of her fellow board members. The vote was unanimous, 73-0. "This is a coup," Lynette shrieked, jumping to her feet so fast she knocked over her water glass. "You can't do this. I've protected this community for 7 years." "Protected it from what?" someone called out. "Daisies and kayaks." As Lynette tried to storm out in a dramatic exit, she tripped over a decorative wooden goose that served as the meeting room's mascot. She went sprawling into the refreshment table, landing face first in a punch bowl labeled "non-approved beverage," in what I assumed was her own handwriting from a previous meeting. Covered in red punch, her authority destroyed, Lynette finally stood up with as much dignity as she could muster, which wasn't much. "You'll all regret this when property values plummet," she declared with a wavering voice, punch dripping from her hair. But the consequences didn't end there. The county prosecutor, reviewing the evidence of her break-in and multiple false police reports, decided to press charges. Lynette was ultimately fined $8,000 for misuse of emergency services and sentenced to 200 hours of community service, specifically serving the elderly residents she'd tormented with early morning inspections. Her expression when the judge read the sentence was one of complete disbelief, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as she realized her reign of HOA terror had not only ended but resulted in actual legal consequences that would follow her for years to come.